Rory, mate, Manchester City, where on earth do we start?
It was implosion, wasn't it? It was self-destruction. I cannot really believe that we're having this conversation because Feyenoord aren't a particularly good side. Fourth in the Eredivisie.
Yeah.
They're a very
sorry,
beatable
just to
team.
repeat, it's the Eredivisie.
Exactly.
There are so many teams in the Premier League that would easily see off Feyenoord.
Yeah, it's like shocking. But the thing that makes it so shocking is that it's totally avoidable. They're in the most privileged position, playing at home against a very beatable team, ready to get themselves back on track ahead of a huge game on the weekend. And they managed to press the self-destruct button. I've never, ever associated Pep Guardiola's teams with self-destruction. And that's exactly what happened. We've seen it against Tottenham. There is actually now something sort of systematically going wrong.
Emerging.
Yeah.
And for me, every single goal that Manchester City conceded in that 14 minutes sort of reeks of a side whose bubble is bursting. That, you know, we've never really seen Manchester City in this light before. I sort of don't understand. Is it a psychological thing? Is it the things that are happening off the pitch having an impact on it? But that sort of feels like an excuse because this is a well-oiled championship-winning machine.
I don't know. Is it complacency? Is it arrogance? Is it a mixture of both? Is it something bigger than that? Is there like a deep-seated problem at the club? Like, I really don't know. But the second that they let Feyenoord back into the game, they were the architects of their own downfall there. You know, Guardiola. At one point, we were talking about him as potentially being one of the best defenders in the world. You know, well worth the 80 million quid. He was meant to be the next best thing, the shining star of a defensive unit that was emerging at Manchester City. It's catastrophic. And his own ability to press that self-destruct button is a major problem. But if we focus on him or if we focus on certain players, we're actually avoiding the problem because
I totally agree.
It's Guardiola. Like, it really is Guardiola. And because of Guardiola's brilliance over the years, it's very difficult for people like us who are opinions and people who provide analysis. It's very difficult for us to make the case that Guardiola is making a mistake. Guardiola got it wrong. Guardiola is making a pig's ear of the situation because anybody who defends Guardiola, it feels a bit rich from us. The geezer wins a league every year. The geezer recently won a treble. How can we possibly go, he's getting it wrong? But I'm afraid if you look at where it went wrong against Feyenoord, it was the in-game management, not only from him, but I felt like the substitutions were ridiculous. Like, they had the game sewn up, they opened the door for Feyenoord to get back into the game, and then they're bringing on like James McAtee, Simpson Pusey. You're like, that can't be the way that you manage international Champions League football at home. You have to get over the line, and it actually. Do you know, there was another moment towards the end of the game that really shocked me. I like Jack Grealish. I've always rated Jack Grealish very highly. And one of the reasons I think Jack Grealish is such a good player and so valuable is because of the control that he provides for a team. You know, he looks after the ball very well. He wins you possession. He wins you free kicks. He works very hard.
Yeah.
Did you see when they won that free kick towards the end of the game, when they're 3-2 up, takes it quick? Like, what are you doing?
It's that head lost territory.
In
a weird way, it reminds me of English rugby. You know, sorry to go off on a tangent, but not able to close out a game. Pep Guardiola said that himself. One thing I will say, Rory, is there are lots of people, understandably, who will use Rodri as the scapegoat, if you like, and they'll say we're without Rodri. Our win percentage with Rodri is something 80% plus, and without him, it's shocking. But for me, that's lazy analysis. It undermines the sort of, I think, how wide the problems are at Manchester City. And you talk about Pep Guardiola there. Pep Guardiola's never had such a poor run of form in his career. I mean, where do they go? Is it a one-man problem? Is it that this is Rodri's fault? Is it that can you put your finger on it, or is this just sort of an absolute malaise of chaos? I
think your expression there about a malaise of chaos is bang on, but we can try, and I think it's quite interesting to try and explore exactly where it went, where it's gone wrong. And I think if you try and drill down into the problem and actually work out why Manchester City are in this situation, I think that it is years of very poor work from Pep Guardiola and his team in the transfer market. For example, if Calvin Phillips was the player that he was supposed to be when they signed him, this injury to Rodri wouldn't be a problem. I also think that over the years they've of their own volition, not got certain players over the line. Remember when they were linked with Declan Rice, massively linked with Declan Rice, and then it seemed like they decided they didn't want to sign Declan Rice, or for one reason or another, they allowed Declan Rice to make a different choice.
So are you making the implication that it's not just then, therefore, Pep Guardiola, you're suggesting is making poor decisions in the transfer market. But are you not there by bringing up Calvin Phillips, making the implication that maybe his coaching's overrated? Because when Calvin Phillips was signed by Manchester City, there was so much furore around him following a fantastic Euros, in my opinion, and we haven't seen the player since he's been at Manchester City.
But I think there's an arrogance, though. I think there's an arrogance at Manchester City, and often when I use the word arrogance, it has negative connotations. People think that that's being insulting. It's
talking
not.
about swagger.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember Manchester United years ago used to have a banner that said "Not arrogant, just better," and I think that's true for Man City.
Yeah,
you can be arrogant, and they almost had a right to be arrogant.
That for being so elite over so many years.
Absolutely. But you know this thing that Pep Guardiola will do when he will let players leave. So he doesn't beg players to sign. He doesn't break his neck to sign players. So, for example, they didn't sign Declan Rice. They didn't sign Jude Bellingham. It felt like they could have signed both if they really wanted to, and they broke their neck and they did everything within their power to make sure that those players became Man City players. But they chose not to. Equally, they allowed Joao Cancelo to leave when it became apparent that he potentially wanted to leave. They allowed Riyad Mahrez to leave when he wanted to leave. They allowed Raheem Sterling to leave. They allowed Julian Alvarez to leave. They seem to think that playing for Manchester City is a privilege, which of course it is, but there was a time when they let Leroy Sané go where they could have done with keeping him. And they are constantly making signings that aren't working. Mateo Kovacic would be one. You know, Ilkay Gundogan coming back would be another. Mateus Nunes, another. Allowing Cole Palmer to leave. Imagine Cole Palmer linking up with Erling Haaland. We all know that. Imagine Cole Palmer linking up with Erling Haaland this season, though.
Yeah.
Imagine the goals in that team.
I totally agree with you. It's obviously a very poor decision to allow Cole Palmer to leave, but I think that is quite easy to say retrospectively, where there's probably an element of which for Cole Palmer he's gone to a manager in Maurizio Pochettino initially who's fantastic with young players. He's probably gone into a team where it's very easy for him to become the main man at the time when Chelsea was sort of in disarray, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, certainly on the pitch under Enzo Maresca. But now Cole Palmer's established. That's an easy thing to say, I think, Rory, about Cole Palmer. I mean, are you saying categorically that Pep Guardiola doesn't sign the right people? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he sprinkles the stardust. He has the razzmatazz. He's the best in the world at the moment, no doubt. But he makes errors.
Is it not an overreaction to what is admittedly a really poor run of form that is completely uncharacteristic of a side that has been absolutely fabulous and wonderful for the past? But
the reason that this is happening, and let's not understate.
It's just 6 games.
Yeah, it's 6 games. But what do you learn from those 6? Those 6 games are symbolic. And also, you say it's just 6 games. On the weekend, they conceded 4 to Tottenham in the most harrowing and embarrassing way that I can really remember that club putting in a performance. 3 days later, they conceded another 3 goals. From the most privileged position that you can possibly be in Europe's premier competition.
And you're putting that down to not the right signings?
I'm putting it down to poor tactics. I'm putting it down to the fact that they were attacking when they were 3-1 up, when they really didn't need to. When it became 3-2, they were still attacking and going for the jugular. I think that's tactically wrong. I don't think that they should be doing that, particularly not in the situation that they're in at the moment, where they desperately needed a win, not only because they're kind of languishing around mid-table of that enormous Champions League, but also because of what it would represent going into the game against Liverpool on the weekend.
But surely there is no better man, and we'll talk about Liverpool in a second, surely there is no better manager on earth better equipped to turn things around at Manchester City.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. But, I mean...
You're saying there's holes appearing.
There's holes appearing. And I do think it's an interesting conversation, even if we both concede that there is nothing that could happen where Pep Guardiola would potentially have to have his future discussed by the Man City board, sacking Pep Guardiola effectively of what I'm suggesting here. I don't think there is a world where that could happen. But
is there a world where that should happen?
I don't know. Like, do you believe that there is a world where it could get so bad? Like, say they lose to Liverpool and then they were...
Which I think at the minute looks likely.
So they go 10... I think they get battered. Say they go 10 games without win. At what point does it become unsustainable for Pep Guardiola? Like, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you just say, look, he's the best manager in the world. Everyone deserves a blip. You know, there were seasons where Liverpool would really challenge, win the league, in fact, and then they'd have a season where they finish outside the Champions League spots.
Everyone's replaceable, Rory. But what I would say is that he's just signed a contract extension. And I think that the test for Pep Guardiola at the minute is whether he can rebuild this Manchester City side, which is so in his image. Of course, there is a world where Pep Guardiola goes on such a poor run of form that he does lose his job, but I don't think that that's something that's anywhere near close.
No, I don't either. But it's going to become very difficult for Guardiola, because if they lose to Liverpool, which I think they will, I think that immediately discounts them from winning the league. A lot of people will disagree with that. A lot of people will say, look, this is a Man City team that is totally capable of winning 20 games in a row. And if they were to do that, they would probably still win the league. But I just don't see that, because they'll end up what, 10 points adrift. To make up 10 points, that's 4 games that not only do they have to win, but Liverpool have to lose.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how you make up that level of points.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.